Maintaining affordable and safe housing in a hot real estate market has been a challenge. Now Mayor Marty Walsh is taking on the issue, proposing a new set of protections for renters. Referred to as the Just Cause Eviction Law, it would ban most landlords from evicting all tenants from a building at the same time. It goes on to outline specific instances when an eviction can proceed, such as the failure to pay rent, property damage, and conducting an illegal activity in a unit. In Boston, about two-thirds of households rent. This measure would require approval of the City Council, the Mayor, and the state legislature. Walsh's proposal comes as affordable housing has been in the national headlines for very different reasons. A warehouse fire in Oakland killed 36 people over the weekend. It had become an ad hoc artist colony as people have been priced out of San Francisco. It was not permitted for residential use. And this week, Donald Trump added Dr. Ben Carson to his list of cabinet nominees. The former GOP presidential candidate and neurosurgeon was picked to oversee housing and urban development, or HUD, despite having no experience in this area. We'll kick things off by looking into the mayor's proposal and how it worked. Joining me are Lydia Edwards, Boston's Deputy Director for the Office of Housing Stability. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Douglas Quattrochi, how'd I do?
Perfect.
Excellent, by the way. Executive Director of MassLandlords.net. Good to meet you.
Likewise.
And Mark Drayson is Executive Director of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Good to see you, Mark. Lydia, can I start with you? Is there anything important in the mayor's proposal that I didn't list in that short little thing I said a second ago? Anything else significant there?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is about the law is trying to do is get us vital data. You know, a lot of what this law will require landlords to submit a copy of the notice to quit if they intend to evict to the Office of Housing Stability. And that is vital to us to understand what is going on in Boston as it's going on.
And it gives you more time.
It gives us more time. It allows us to then respond and give a list of rights to the homeowner or tenant, and allows them to have more time and understand what's going on.
You know, Doug, I was a tenant lawyer in the South Bronx centuries ago. What the mayor's proposed is like this much as compared to what exists in places like New York City, et cetera. What's objectionable about what seems to me, at least, to be a fairly modest proposal?
Well, yeah, it does look modest, and I would say the marketing is really brilliant with it. What's objectionable about it is the one thing you didn't mention, which is that tenants can refuse to pay a rent increase if it is deemed unfair under the Consumer Protection Statute. That's a very broad set of possibilities here. We don't know what judges are going to say is unfair. Perhaps if someone's been living in an apartment for a long period of time, any rent increase is unfair.
Can they make a unilateral declaration that I consider it unfair and then have to litigate this thing? Is that how it would work?
They can refuse.
You're saying no, yes?
They can refuse to pay a rent increase, and then the landlord will have to go to court to evict them.
You know,
Which is exactly what they would be doing now.
Which is what?
If you refuse to pay a rent increase, you would move forward as a landlord to evict the tenant.
Except the ordinance specifically advises the judge to look at Chapter 93A of the Consumer Protection Law, and that says unfair business practices shall be illegal or unlawful.
You know, Mark, I assume you support this. Is that
I think it's a reasonable, and I think it's a modest proposal.
But it seems that as a guy who's concerned about the affordable housing stock, aren't many of the people who he works with who object to this proposal by Mayor Walsh the exact same people who you're depending upon to be constructing and making available affordable units? So it puts them in a pretty weird position vis-a-vis
I don't think so because of the
no?
market right now. Right now the market is great for landlords. The market is great for real estate development. I know that isn't always the case, but right now it is. And at the moment, this gives landlords tremendous advantages over tenants. And I think it just tries to even things out a little bit more. It's not a big proposal. It's not a dramatic proposal.
Would you support any proposal that increased tenants' rights? Forget what the mayor proposed. Would you support anything that gave greater protection to tenants from potential evictions?
Probably not. Let me explain why. Let me first say, if the City of Boston wants to petition the legislature to do something, which is what's required here, we should petition for zoning reform. We have too much of this not in my backyard.
I totally agree with that, and my agency, MAPC, has been working on zoning reform for 20 years, and we're still going to keep working on it, and it's an area where we have common ground with the landlord.
But the bottom line, just so we're clear, modest or expansive, your view is where it is where we should stay.
We already have the strictest landlord-tenant laws in the country, by multiples in some cases. You can't charge a late fee until 30 days, which is twice Maine at 15 days. You can't evict a tenant without storing their belongings for 6 whole months, which is 3 times the next nearest state, Vermont, at 2 months.
But in a big way, landlords do have greater right to evict a tenant than they do in most major metropolitan areas. That is a fact, is it not? You may think it's fine, but it gives them more...
The evictions are designed to be long. The average eviction in 2014 was over 55 days, and the longest in our study of 7,000 evictions was a year and 2 months.
Well, some people may not feel that 55 days is an inordinately long period of time to lose your home.
Right.
But, you know, I think that there's going to be back and forth. There's going to be back and forth between the mayor, the city council, the legislature, the landlords, the tenant advocates. This is really just the first salvo. What I feel is important about this is the mayor is making a fundamental statement that, look, we've got to try and even the playing field a little bit here. Tenants are at a great disadvantage right now in the marketplace. Let's see if there's any modest way in which we can give them a hand.
Speaking of the mayor, your organization, the mayor, have worked to put together this 2030 plan for tens of thousands of more affordable units. So what we're talking about up until now is only if you're lucky enough to have an apartment in Boston to begin with.
Right.
But the real challenge is to get into one. Well, this 53,000 unit thing is pretty bold in some ways. Is there nearly enough affordable housing in the thing that you and Mayor Walsh put together for the growing population, that working people that need affordable housing?
Well, the city's plan for 53,000 units, a lot of those units will be affordable.
Yeah.
And a lot of them will have to be for families, which is also a good thing. The ability to produce affordable housing is generally a question of whether or not there are state and federal subsidies available. And we had a big advance in the city of Boston on Election Day when the Community Preservation Act was passed, and that'll put another $20 million in on an annual basis.
Boston already has one of the highest percentages of affordable housing in the country.
That is correct, is it not?
That's true, yes. Unfortunately, it's a very high-cost city.
Are organizations like his doing enough to contribute to this creation of an affordable housing pool?
I think that landlords and developers in the city of Boston are really doing a tremendous amount to try and find sites, to get them permitted.
Do you believe that, or is that the politically necessary
Doug is absolutely right that the permitting process is a difficult one. It's difficult in Boston, although the mayor has made tremendous efforts to try and make it easier. It's even harder outside.
Small landlords are not developers. There are 360 municipalities, all with their own zoning restrictions, and they prohibit landlords from subdividing large apartments into smaller units or making safe basement and attic spaces. So we're not able to do what we want to do.
And I just want to make sure that we are very clear about who this law is going to impact, right? Those landlords who have less than 7 units are not even included.
About the just cause eviction.
I am talking about that. I just want to make sure that that's very clear, right? So vast majority of landlords are not going to be impacted.
It's not the small landlord. I want to think bigger than, with all due respect to this for a minute. In 1994, rent control was repealed in the state. And one of the great ironies, the horrible ironies of this thing, is, of my recollection, is the 3 communities that actually had rent control, Brookline, Boston, and Cambridge, my hometown, voted to keep it. Right. And the other 348 cities and towns voted against it. Why is your boss not thinking bigger? If you really, he may not like it, but if you really want protections for tenants, rather than dabbling around the edges, rather than hoping you can build enough affordable housing, fight for rent control so that there are, just like there is in New York City, why not fight for something that would be guaranteed and that was supported by the people of Boston when there was a popular vote on it? Why not do that?
I think our definition of thinking bigger is a little different. Mayor Walsh has introduced several ideas. This idea being one of the toolkit for anti-displacement. So he also just introduced the tax credit increase for property owners today as well. So there's several initiatives that are coming together to create a big picture that is preventing displacement and assuring that.
But rent control would be a far bigger solution for far more people, would it not?
I love that Mayor Walsh picked 7 units as the cutoff, because Mass Landlords publishes our membership statistics. Our median units owned is 6, which means half our members have 6 units or fewer. So Mayor Walsh still technically has the landlord vote with this ordinance.
Even though you don't support anything he's doing.
Right.
Exactly. Let's move on to the guy who's in charge of the federal stuff that you were talking about a couple of minutes ago. Here's Ben Carson on Fox News talking about his qualifications to be HUD secretary when he was considering whether or not, a few days ago, whether he was considering whether he'd actually accept the appointment.
I grew up in the inner city and have spent a lot of time there and have dealt with a lot of patients from that area, and recognize that we cannot have a strong nation if we have weak inner cities.
I want to talk about whether he's the right person for the job, or a right person for the job. You're quoted in the Globe saying, Dr. Carson has no experience running housing programs, overseeing financial incentives, or managing public agencies. Barack Obama had no experience running anything. And now he's running one of the largest employers in the United States of America. So experience alone is not the only
No,
criterion,
experience alone
right?
is not the only thing, but Dr. Carson has also called fair housing programs socialist and, in one case, communist, and I think has generally indicated, a disdain for programs that try and help people to afford a place to live, which we have found often helps to stabilize the rest of their lives, stabilizes their
How
employment.
much
It helps
power
them to
does he
raise
have to
kids.
affect what happens in this city and in this state? How much power does the HUD secretary have?
He has some. He doesn't have
has
most. He
enormous
doesn't
power.
have all. But I think he does have substantial power because a lot of housing money comes from the federal
Doug, are
government.
landlords happy with this nomination?
I think they're very curious. Here's why. Because right here in Massachusetts, Ray Mariano, the Worcester Housing Authority, now retired, he piloted this self-sufficiency program.
Talked about it here a couple of months ago.
Which HUD declined to fund. And now that you have somebody like Carson who's talking about self-sufficiency in his New York Times interview, I think we might actually see a revisitation.
So you're
to that.
pretty happy that he's
Well,
the man in the
I
job?
mean, does he have experience running a $47 billion budget? No. And I think a lot of people are worried about what's going to happen to Section 8 funding.
I don't know if you're speaking for you or the mayor. How do you and or the mayor feel about this guy in charge of housing when housing is one of the central issues in your boss's agenda?
My boss. So I'm speaking on behalf of and with my boss.
Okay, fine.
The mayor. And I think all of us agree that the city of Boston is focused on today and what's going on with the displacement, with unaffordable rents, and trying to solve those issues as they come. It would be nice to be able to predict and see what the future brings to us in terms of our relationship with HUD. We intend to continue to have a good and positive relationship with whoever is at the helm. Our goal is to assure that people can stay and live in Boston.
So the translation is as you don't want to criticize the new director of HUD because maybe you can work. I'm serious. I don't mean this
I don't
facetiously.
see
Maybe
it
you can
as-
work on.
No, look, at the end of the day, you're right. There are people who have taken the helm with very little experience and done excellent jobs. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about what could be. I know what's
You're
before
gonna
us.
deal with what is.
We're looking at the issues
Got it.
right now, and we're doing our best to ensure that Boston can be a sustainable city regardless of who is in the White House.
Good to see you again, Larry. Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for your time. Doug, good to meet you.
Likewise.
Mark, great to see you. It's been a long time.
Thanks, Jim.
Take care.